if we get the Senate but not the presidency and the House, or the presidency and the Senate but not the House for the Republicans, the action will be at the states. And look, over the last 5 years, we've passed school choice, freedom for school, freedom education freedom in 10 states for everybody, 4 states for more. Texas is yet to come. A number of states, or Tennessee is going to roll across the finish line. We'll be adding more and more freedom. This is the biggest monopoly in the United States, damaging the country, damaging our future. And we've invited FedEx and UPS to get involved. And pretty soon we're going to have the whole idea of email competing with the post office. But we're not this is not taking down the post office, it's not taking down public education. I would add to that, there are now 10 states that have committed to go to 0 on their income tax. There are only 7 there now. Another 10 have passed laws to get there or are in the process of it. And 14 states are in a single rate tax, flat rate tax. Watch the states. The red states are doing interesting things that move state to state and will change the politics of the country, and then we can come back and relitigate who runs Washington.
Lots to talk about from here to November. Thank you, Mr. Grover. But Barbara, the political scenario of the United States and I would say Latin America, we have a session on Latin America, so I'm not going to talk about the economic outlook for Latin America. We have a session Saturday where we welcome you to come and listen about the prospects for Milei, and yet despite the rising autocracies there, all of this seems to pale in comparison, Barbara, with the political environment in Europe, where France seems to be voting ultra-right one week and then ultra-left the next week, and the entire political ball seems to be up in the air. Can you give us a little clarity about how that also affects the economic perspectives of the region?
Yeah, well, with pleasure. So the fiscal pressures are totally back again, and the warning signs are coming up in each and every country. I'm not talking about Germany because Lorena will cover that and talk about this literally sick man of Europe. But we have done economic stimulus. We have overspent on social security, on military spending and everything. And our governments definitely have not done anything. The migration crisis is still there. Our population is overaged. So these are the prospects for Europe. Our inflation rates are still not down. It's way too high, and then the European Commission and the European Central Bank have some stupid ideas like central bank digital currency overall. So the European elections that had happened a couple of weeks ago voted the Social Democrats, the Socialists, and the Green Party, more or less, they reduced them to 1/3 of the 720 seats of the European Parliament. However, the European People's Party also lost several seats, but von der Leyen, who needs 362 seats to be again the Commissioner of the European Union, is trying to make deals on the one hand with the Greens to get their votes, on the other hand with some conservative or right-leaning groups. But the message actually is that center-right groups won. And the deal will be actually how can we reform Europe, what needs to be done. And coming back to the French elections, and I have the numbers here. So actually, Marine Le Pen won by votes. She won the majority. 37% of the votes went to Marine Le Pen. However, due to this electoral system that they have, she only got 143 seats, which is actually the most number of seats that they have ever had in the RN. However, this Macron, the president, went to bed, if I may say so, with the Social Democrats and all the socialists. The left got 26% of the votes, and Macron only got 23% of the votes. So this was his hugest defeat. But the left had 180 seats, Macron 163, and Le Pen, as I mentioned before, only 143. So this will be a very difficult thing. They will have to renegotiate, and the government is definitely standing on, will be on shaky ground. And I'm sure there will be re-elections because there is so much deficit and debt that most of the governments in Europe will have huge issues on that.
France seems to be the center of attention right now, not just because of the Olympics, but Mark Skousen reminded us in this panel to talk about the sick man of the room that is actually Germany. So Rainer Z, who also has a great book, How Nations Escape Poverty, for you all to be able to buy, and I'm sure there will be book signings later on for him. So Rainer, please, 3 minutes.
I'm healthy, I'm not the sick man of Europe, but Germany is, Germany is of course, the growth expectation is 0.1% for Germany. If you compare it on average for the world, it's 3%. For our neighbor Poland, it's 2.8%. And this is due to an ideology-driven energy policy. First, we phased out nuclear power plants. What is a crazy idea? If you believe climate change is the biggest threat, you should build more nuclear power plants instead of phasing that out. Then we started to phase out coal power plants. We forbid fracking. Now we import fracking gas LNG from the United States. And then we made us dependent on Russian gas. And now we have almost the highest energy prices in the world. And this is not only because of the war. It was even before the war started, we had almost the highest electricity prices in the world. And the result is that companies who rely heavily on electricity, they are leaving Germany. For example, BASF, this is the biggest chemical company in the world. They prefer now to produce in China. They say in China, we have less bureaucracy than in Germany, and the electricity prices are 7 times higher in Germany. So they are leaving. And the number of bankruptcies from companies is on a 10-year high now in Germany. For companies with a turnover of more than 10 million, the number of companies who got insolvent increased by 41% from this year to last year, if you compare it. And these are not the only problems. You know, we have a huge welfare state anywhere in Germany. Now they made a new law. You can get money from the state. They call it Bürgergeld. And if you live in Munich, for example, you get $3,500, like euros, the month without doing anything. And of course, there are a lot of people who prefer to do nothing. And on the other hand, companies look desperately for workforce, for skilled workers, but also for people who do the simplest work. In restaurants, they find no people because if I get the money from the state, why should I work there 40 hours? I get it for nothing. Maybe in addition, some hours of illegal work, and then I have even more. Now the number of restaurants who get bankrupt increased by 27%. Now, so we have a lot of problems, and of course, on the other hand, we have a migration, a big influx from millions of people who come there, but uneducated people. And from the people who got this, what we call Bürgergeld, money from the state, 65% are migrants. 65% are migrants. I'm pro-migration if it's the skilled workers, but these are people who, in a lot of cases, who want to take the money from the state. And I think we shouldn't criticize
that free rider problem exists practically all over the world, and it's very important that you mention it. But I'd like to hear if there are at least better news on the other side of the world. Preeti was back here with us. It's wonderful to see you again, and Rainer, of course. So Preeti, can you tell us, China, India, are there better news there, or is it a little bit of the same series of structural challenges for the global economy?
Thank you and good morning. New powers, old habits, but who exactly is shaping the global economy? I'll talk about the Asian century. So China first. The Chinese economic woes. In the long run, Chinese economic growth faces the challenges of what I like to call the 4 Ds: debt, demand, demography, and decoupling. So the financial system that has worked for them for so long today is hit by a complete property market collapse, slow growth, slow demand, slow consumption, deflation, a financial system that doesn't, include everybody, and coupled with an aging population and very low birth rates. So they haven't had a great few years. And I think the near future, that's not likely to change soon. But they're not out of the woods yet. I think they're stumbling right now, but I don't predict a fall anytime soon. I think very few people talk about the demography. It's almost like a ticking time bomb, not in the near future, but certainly for the longer future. You know, for the first time ever, I think we're seeing also a Chinese population that is very frustrated, and the severe manifestation of this would be some sort of a uprising, potential implosion. I mean, people have been predicting some kind of a break in the form that China exists, but this is really for the long term. So I think the world needs to see China for what it is and cure itself from the Chinese addiction, the Chinese fix, as I like to say. But you know, it's stable for the time being. The India story, well, the biggest election in the world just took place, and Mr. Modi has been re-elected for a historical third time. This is very important for India because it proves political stability and continuity, both of which are extremely important for attracting foreign investment, FDIs. So Morgan Stanley recently reported that if India continues to grow at 7 to 8% for the next 5 years, 10 years, it should hit its goals of hitting 5 trillion by the end of 2025 and 10 trillion by the end of the decade. But their issues are more because of a coalition government at the moment, the ability to pass on very, very important and necessary reforms, that they may be obstruction from within the own government. So we hope that that doesn't happen. And of course, on a larger scale, I think actually no country should be getting involved in wars right now. That is the stupidest thing you can ever do. But when you get involved in whether it's an international conflict that you have nothing to do with, or an internal conflict like a border conflict or something like that, it will seriously derail your financial growth and financial goals, because wars cost and it's not a pretty sight. So that's my
that reminds us of the broken window fallacy of Frederick Bastiat, right? Which is so important to keep in mind today. Now, Rainer, I'd like to ask you, some of your work is focused on the risks and possible dangers of trade regionalization. And are we on the verge of seeing new emerging blocks where it would take basically protectionism to the regional scale and be much more difficult to address? Can you enlighten us a bit?
Thank you, Roberto, and thank you for the invitation. Good morning to everyone. So I also want to talk about China, but I do not need to repeat the same thing that was said before. I think what you are mentioning is very important. It sometimes looks as if it's the world divided between US and China. It's not the case. There is actually South Asia as well as Southeast Asia, which are extremely powerful by now. It's a third of the world population, just Southeast and South Asia. And they are very ambitious, and they do not take sides. So we just saw Prime Minister Modi in Moscow. But at the same time, he's also friendly with American investors. We have the Malaysians, the Vietnamese, they are applying for BRICS membership with Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, etc. But at the same time, they also want to become, some of them, OECD members. They are interested also in Western investment. So what we see here is an entire region that's getting stronger and stronger out of their own drive and reaping the benefits of the conflict. So they were the first beneficiaries of globalization, Southeast Asia, through trade and investment, and now they are the beneficiaries of the conflict between the United States and China. By now, we have the largest amount of foreign direct investment in Southeast Asia coming from OECD headquartered companies. At the same time, the biggest investor in Southeast Asia is China. So everybody's wooing the region. They are actually also doing some reforms, especially Vietnam is very active in this. Malaysia is offering itself for data centers and everything around digital economy, chip production, obviously. And Indonesia, where I'm based and where I'm fighting for economic freedom, this is still a little slow, so they're still not really embracing the idea of trade and investment, but there are 280 million people, so when that giant comes around, I mean, there's no more stopping Southeast Asia from growing. Let me add one point before I conclude, very short one, because I find what we need to know about China is that they do something, but I'm worried that the United States and Europe are repeating. They're falling the same trap. So they have pushed their industries, what they thought were pivotal industries, strategic industries, to an extent where they have these overcapacities, large overcapacities. And now what I see here in the United States and Europe are investments into batteries, investments into panels and everything, where already capacity are its limits. So I'm a little worried with all the government interventions that we are seeing. We are repeating what China does and end up with high costs and little efficiency.
We have just 5 minutes, but Grover, very quickly, you do a lot of work on trade as well. What are your perspectives, given the U.S., given the possibility of a new Trump administration? Will the global trade war, which is really a contradiction in terms, trade is supposed to be free and voluntary, but will this continue? Will we see this regionalization and the risks that Rainer was mentioning?
That's a significantly unknown question. When he was president, he threw the tariffs up against Chinese steel. That made American automobiles more expensive. That made the steel workers go get more pay, but not more investment in steel production. So it didn't help. And then, of course, our entire agriculture sector was damaged by China's willingness to punish us back. And then we subsidized the farmers and turned them, for a while, into welfare recipients, which is not where you want the farmers to be, because that turns them into Democrats. And so that did not work very well. On the other hand, he sounded like he wanted to blow up the free trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States, and he basically just tapped it a little bit and blessed it. This is now an okay deal. So to a certain extent, there was a huge move forward on acceptance of more open trade with the Mexico, US, and Canada, because people are mad at China, they do the other. I have recommended to the campaign, and as have others, that they join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Britain is supposed to be coming into. If the US and Britain joins that, that's 40% of GDP. And then the way to punish China is not to raise tariffs against them, but to lower tariffs of everybody else dealing with us. That's the way to do it. And then you say to the Europeans, you know, if you escape from the European Union, right, you can come join us too. You don't have to be stuck there. Brexit was a model. So I think that's a much better way to poke the Europeans and hit the Chinese, rather than tariffs, which are taxes on Americans, not foreigners.
Excellent, thank you. That's fantastic. Barbara, and hopefully Rainer as well, can you tell us a little bit about a European that is really attracted to center stage, Viktor Orban?
Yeah. Viktor Orban is now the chairman of the European Union as of July 1st, and he really did a great thing. First thing he did on the 2nd of July, he went to Kiev, talk with Zelensky in order to get the diplomatic way going again and discuss peace. 3 days later, he flew to Moscow, tried to negotiate or discuss the same thing. 3 days later, he went to Beijing and talked with those guys. And last week, or actually as of now, he's in DC. So he took stage, he used the diplomatic ally again, and what is most importantly, he is openly speaking up against those big blocs, against Russia, China, and Iran, and those negotiations that are going behind the scenes, which is important for us as Westerners. Because we must not forget, after all, he has saved Europe already in 2015 when he closed the borders back then. So this is a very interesting way. One thing that we need to look at with regards to trade is important, that he will hopefully join all those trade negotiations, and that his team understands that we don't need so-called managed trade, we really need free trade. And so he's a big voice on that front. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but at least somebody who does not follow what von der Leyen has done in the EU and what they have not,
that is good,
where they have failed.
But his autocratic tendencies also worry a great many people. I want to say on Latin America that a lot of people here are fans of Bukele in El Salvador, and I think it's a very similar phenomenon. He's not easily categorizable as left or right or center or up or down or whatever. He's one of these new autocrats of the 21st century, but there is a great danger of prolonging his power. Perhaps we should do the formula of how nations escape poverty. Rainer, you have 30 seconds to explain how Poland escaped poverty.
Yes, you know, Poland was one of the poorest countries in Europe in the 80s. Poorer than Ukraine, for example. And then they started with free market reforms. Balcerowicz, a professor for economics, who believes in Hayek and Mises, similar to Millet in a way, not in his personality, but what he believes in. And now, since 3 decades, Poland is Europe's growth champion. And so you see, it works. But on the other hand, first, for 2 years, it became worse. And I hope people in Argentina will understand it, that you can't change that went wrong over decades and decades in half a year. First, some things will become worse, but then, if they are patient, it will become great. And
Rainer's going to be in Argentina presenting his book in August. I invite you all to come to the Latin America session. We're going to explain the phenomenon that is going on in Argentina. It's absolutely fascinating. And the best thing, it gives me an excuse to end the panel by saying, Viva la libertad, carajo. Thank you very much. Thank you to our great panel.
I totally dig this one.